Since she announced her candidacy, or she was announced as the candidate, Donald Trump has met with interviewers, press conferences, town halls, not counting the rallies, about 75 times. She's given 5 interviews, no press conferences whatsoever. And they have been with a local Philadelphia sympathetic reporter who, it was a disaster. And then she gave one with Dana Bash, but she insisted that Waltz be with her. And some of the questions were framed with multiple choice answers in advance. Then she gave one with the Association of Black Journalists that didn't go down well, very short. Then she gave one with Oprah, where Oprah was sort of coaching her. That did not go down well. Then she gave one with 2 NBA former players that did not go down well. So my point is that she will not talk for more than 10 or 20 minutes, and only with a sympathetic interviewer. And if she does a debate, or if a Trump person does a debate, whether she's in it or not, the moderators now have discredited the genre entirely. We saw that with the Trump debate, where they intervened and they promised they would not do that again. And then, of course, CBS, the 2 moderators on Tuesday night, started fact-checking singularly and solely Vance and incorrectly. And they were wrong about the fact checks, but they were not supposed to do that. So it's been very hard for the Trump-Vance team to bring her out, because if you want to debate her, she will only debate on network news, and network news has been disastrous for Donald Trump. The first time he did it, it was the setup stress test for Joe Biden. He was pretty much on the way to a landslide victory, and then they goaded him into saying, come on CNN before either candidate has been nominated and before the conventions have been held. We've never done that. And yet he did. And he watched Biden melt before his eyes. And that was the signal to the powers that be to remove him. And then when Harris came back, she goaded him into a debate in which Mr. Muir and Ms. Davis intervened again and again. They picked the questions that were tailored toward Kamala Harris. They asked for follow-ups and explicit stick to the question types of corrections to Trump. They fact-checked him. And then they did the same thing with Vance. So it's hard for him to get into a fair, disinterested debate or venue with her. And then if she does not she does not hold press conferences, and she will only be interviewed for a brief time. And I think now, in the last 30 days or so, she will not do any interviews because they have been disastrous. I will say, though, that if you look carefully at the polls the last 72 hours in the swing states, she is hemorrhaging. And that is a result of the aggregate effect of, as you pointed out, in part the Harris-Vance debate, but also the aggregate effect of all of these interviews that were staged transparently so. And she just went into a wash, rinse, spin cycle where she talked no matter what the question posed, she says, I'm middle class and I grew up and I believe in empathy and I believe in a can-do economy. And the answers have no bearing or no relationship to the question asked. And so that has hurt her. There's been some extraneous things. These October surprises raise a lot of skepticism, especially the Jack Smith indictments, especially the lowering of the Fed rate suddenly. Then they were very late and tardy, almost 5 days before either one of them took an interest in Hurricane Helene. We were told by the media that it was not of a serious nature. We were told for 3 or 4 days, only 30 or 40 people. It looks now that it could have been much worse than Katrina. It's wiped out whole areas. The impression is that this is sort of an East Palestine, Ohio, Appalachian phenomenon where lower middle class working people have been decimated and devastated by a natural disaster of which this administration, as in the East Palestine, has not been prompt or empathetic. And And Joe Biden was kind of callous when he was asked about that at the White House. Why haven't you been there? Why haven't you been engaged? He said, I have. I was on the phone for 2 hours. Well, that was counterproductive. And then she wanted to do a photo op. So she staged a photo op as if she was on the phone directing things from Air Force Two. But unfortunately for her, when people looked at the photo, the pages were blank that she was working on, and her earplugs were not connected to her phone. The wires were not connected. It was complete photo op. So all of these things are starting to, and the Middle East, remember that Jake Sullivan boasted 8 days before October 7th of last year that the Middle East portfolio was the calmest it had been in 20 years, and they inherited a very calm area. So I think people are looking at these things in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and it's going to be very close. But right now, Harris and Waltz seem more concerned about the election than does Trump-Vance. You make a good point that he hasn't been able to pin her down and say, this is what she was her entire life. These are the issues that she embraced. These temporary issues, to the degree that they're sincere, would still hurt the country. And if she is a change candidate, she had 3.5 years to show us that, which she didn't. This is a counterfeit candidacy, something like that. But it's very hard in this country to break through the Silicon Valley, social media, print media, institutional bias that we have. And, but we'll see. I think the internal polls, if you look at the two candidates, you can see that there's a sense of eagerness, anxiety on the part of her candidacy. And that suggests that people have remarked that her internal polls show that she's got big problems in Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. And the way our system works, if Trump were to win the states he won in 2016, that would be Nevada, and he came very close in 2020. But if he were to win Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina, then he would not need to win Michigan and Wisconsin, just Pennsylvania, or any of the three. So it's going to be a very close race. I think the betting has now changed the last 2 days to 50. The private betting sites are about 50-50. And it seems that the left-wing media is much more angry, much angrier, much more anxious than they were 2 weeks ago.